Hello, my name is Vladimir Izmalkov, and today we will be talking about AI guardrails for documentation creation. Well, I'm a technical author at Canonical. I'm a PhD and member of Institute for Scientific and Technical Communication. Also, I consider myself a Doxis code advocate with 15 plus years of experience in software documentation, including cloud platforms, database management systems, and distributed data processing. Basically, what I encountered a lot is that we have this LLM fundamental tectonic shift in documentation creation and how we work and how we create and how we use documentation. So this tectonic shift needs to be addressed. And as a part of this effort, we were experimenting, and I was experimenting quite a lot with how to use AI for both production and usage of documentation. Also, AI can generate content at quite a scale. So writing is no longer the main bottleneck. Verifying accuracy and quality of documentation is. For example, at Canonical, engineers actively contribute to their product documentation, and both engineers and technical authors encouraged to experiment responsibly with AI across their work, including code and documentation. I created some guardrails to help engineers avoid common problems when AI becomes part of the writing process. As more and more people rely on AI-generated answers instead of actually reading documentation directly, we also tend to require more AI optimization. Basically, our content must help LLMs retrieve, interpret, and communicate information accurately. So this is what we will be talking about today. First of all, let's talk about what's so great about using AI in documentation production. Well, one of my favorites is that it helps us eliminate blank page syndrome, right? So when we actually get to the task of creating new content, we can rather simply research the topic and create first drafts and work on them quite reliably, especially since the first generation is not that great, so we immediately find the room for improvement. So at least for me, it helps a lot. There are also such benefits as controlling information architecture, since AI can analyze huge chunks of text very fast. So it can provide us with a lot of summaries, a lot of plans and layouts. Also refactoring quite a lot of content very fast. And given how fast text generation is, we can generate multiple variants requiring different style, tone, and even vocabulary constraints. And all that can be quite effectively used by technical authors and engineers alike for improving their documentation, basically. Also, LLMs can provide an experience of a reviewing partner, basically just throwing out some ideas how to improve your content. And quite often this idea is very useful. I'm quite enjoying using AI as some kind of encyclopedia or research assistant where you research a topic that AI can know a lot about. Of course, you cannot trust it entirely, but so they say about Wikipedia. Also, AI is relatively good at creating examples and some sample data. You cannot, again, rely on it 100%, but, well, that's just an example, right? So let's talk about what's not so great about AI. Specifically, lots of people heard and encountered these hallucinations. You can consider LLMs to be pathological liars because, like, why would they even lie about this? They confidently wrong about some weird specific topics, and you cannot predict when it will happen and why, but because there is no motivation behind it. It's just how it works. Also, the amount of precision they give in the answers quite often diverges people from realizing that, well, actually, it's all wrong. So false precision is quite misleading. The citations can be hallucinated too. So even if they do provide you with evidence, you have to investigate further. But all of these hallucinations, they also lead to such effects as trust erosion, for example, one of the most significant ones, and the sheer fundamental qualities of LLMs create the property of non-deterministic results. Basically, we cannot rely on these same conditions to lead to the same result every time, which actually quite annoying, especially if you work with automating some pipelines and can provide a lot of unpredictable results. There is also a hidden tech debt, or how I call it, understanding or cognitive debt. Basically, if you rely on AI to provide you with some materials for your documentation without doing the manual analysis yourself, you're relying on it making some conclusions and analysis without getting the experience, without getting the knowledge firsthand. You're basically outsourcing it without getting all the benefits of creating it manually, creating this value manually. So the expertise can be discounted. And that leads to actually a very interesting effect of hindering your own learning experience and the exploration for new knowledge, for new skills. It's actually can, with improper usage, hinder your skill up, hinder your experience, hinder your progress. That's very important. And the amount of polish the end result usually from MLMs has make it harder for non-professionals to find the factual mistakes and some logic contradictions in the responses. So how do we stay on the light side without suffering from the darker parts? Well, first of all, you need to consider AI to be not just a tool that you use reliably, because again, non-deterministic results, it's more like a partner that you should learn the quirks about, right? So basically you work with it and you try to work around its weaknesses and support it, adjust your communication for its weaknesses while using its strengths. That's very much like partner-like relationships, although I understand it's not a life, right? So not many people consider this approach. And then we have to take full responsibility for the end result and its quality. Yes, AI can hallucinate and create mistakes and lead us somewhere the way we don't want to go, but still the responsibility of verification and validation is always on a human being. So you are the human being in your pair working with AI tools. You have to be responsible. You have to always verify, always validate. It's your responsibility. You have to assume this responsibility. Also, continuous experimentation. It's very important given how fast this area of knowledge moves right now. There are new models every few months, new scaffolding, new tooling. You have to keep up, to keep using new models to avoid vendor lock-in and other negative effects. So how do we create software documentation? That's a fundamental question. Well, actually, the same approach applicable here as very well-known software development lifecycle, but how I call in this particular context is software documentation development lifecycle. Basically, we utilize the same cycle here, more or less similar stages, and it's very, very useful for us to validate results on each stage and to go with very responsible AI usage to assist on every stage, which is a very important part of the process. And it works especially well if you utilize the Doxys code approach. If not, some of these stages can easily be skipped, but overall idea stays the same. The important part is that AI capabilities can and should be used on every stage to improve the results. So this is more general, like diagram of AI-assisted creative process. So how can AI help us with this documentation production? It's a very simple yet hard question to answer, actually. So we have these different use cases we can use AI for, you see. Starting from content generation with my least favorite, going to rewriting, which one of my most favorites, then summarization, refactoring, all of these we will be going into a little bit more detail later on. But the important bit is that these kind of use cases, they can be applicable on different stages of the process. You have to keep in mind to use AI in a more advanced scenarios rather than just simply create documentation for this repository, right? You have to go into a little bit more detail to build your own cognitive function, to build your understanding of what's going on and what is the expected result here, how good looks like, so you can validate it when AI actually provides you with a result. So let's start with the very first item here, content generation. Like I said, my least favorite one. This is the most dangerous and at the same time, the most attractive use case, I think. Generating new text content from nothing. Seriously, everyone wants a single button or prompt approach to make everything magically works well. Well, the problem is with the definition of well and the definition of work and everything. You get the point. Without proper process, preparation, and guardrails, it becomes too easy to do more harm than good because how powerful this usage is. You can generate a lot of content, right? So while it's a very powerful use case, it requires a lot of preparation that's often neglected. I still advise many of my colleagues to start from a handwritten draft that would provide much needed context and example for the LLMs. But here are a few tips you can still use if you want to try. So basically, the more you generate, the more you would have to review and validate, right? So the more work you create for yourself. Try to make it smaller, as in literally require constraints from AI how big the content is expected. You can do it in pages, in sentences, in characters, even whatever you're most comfortable with. Also, best idea to provide a lot of context, ideally even examples. Examples work great actually for content creation. And expected to be hallucinating at some point. That's almost inevitable. Yes, newer models are much better at this, but still, you have to be on the watch for that. And lastly, you have to realize that AI doesn't have a creative intent or even a common sense. So you are the responsible human. You should be validating everything. Finally, the guardrails for this particular use case, software documentation development lifecycle was mentioned. It's a good framework to have about the preparation needed. All stages of the lifecycle can be done with the AI usage, ideation, research, drafting, polishing, verification, you name it. So go iteratively about the process, right? And use AI tools on each stage as much as you need, as much as you want, as much as you're comfortable with. And also avoid generating something out of nothing. Again, providing lots of context, lots of examples goes a very long way for improving the quality, especially if something that you want from AI cannot be expressed, at least you cannot express in a clear statement of requirement, but you have an example of what you want. So that's a great use case. Agentic AI can also search for context in your repository. So having it agentic with access to the whole code base might be a good idea if you have basically permissions, if you can let AI model to work with your code repository, for example, if it's public. Next use case, one of my favorites, as a non-native English speaker, I can recognize the power of rewriting texts with these LLMs. It provides multiple alternatives very fast. I can choose from, I can learn from even. So it has great vocabulary. Feel free to use it for anything really, any kind of rewrite. It's very, very adjustable. You can provide different goal audience, context, and constraints, and it will adapt immediately. It's super, super fast. So it provides you with multiple variants for you to choose from. Don't forget to require multiple variants. It's a great way to validate the results. Also, use smaller batches. That's surprisingly effective tactics, actually going not for the full page or full article, full something of a documentation, but rather smaller batches. Let's write this section or even this paragraph or even a sentence and rewrite it. Basically, you send it the draft, you ask it for rewrite for clarity, proofread it even, and yeah, the results should be great. And the smaller batch will provide much less room for an error for AI, but also provide much better experience for you to review it. And that's the first guardrail. Basically, you have to review everything and very thoroughly. That's important. Because, and not only because, but still, the original meaning of the text that being rewritten also can be altered by these LLMs. That's one of the problems that you can encounter. You should look for that. Internal contradiction also could occur, but you should just keep in mind what was the original meaning and keep everything straight, especially facts. And don't abuse it. Don't send two big batches that you will only skim through. You should read attentively and verify every small piece, ideally. Also, the bigger rewrites are also quite interesting here, especially if you rewrite for clarity. It's very, very interesting how AI can provide you with these smaller versions, more concise versions of the same text. Experiment with it. So summarization, it's a great way. It's very, very fast because you can send a lot of data and AI can consume it real fast. Of course, it will use your input tokens. It's not so great at making conclusions, though, so you should watch out for these. And it's decent at taking keynotes and takeaways. Just don't expect them to be precise or accurate or even not hallucinated. So basically not something very, very important, but something that you need to summarize real quickly, some keynotes of a regular meeting that you can go back to. And ideally, in these cases, when you do summarization, don't rely entirely on the summary. The way to do it is to keep the original and to revert back to it if you have some important facts that you want to refer to. Do not rely on the summary as a matter of fact. So double checking all the facts when you're referring to them, it's great. And also keeping this original close to the summary so you can find it easily. Next one, refactoring. Yes, documentation refactoring is a thing. It's actually a great thing if you need to change terminology or anything about your product. It's actually real good. LLMs are real good at that. The original content also provides a lot of context. So again, it's quite an interesting use case for LLMs. The instructions must be very clear, though, what exactly you want to replace or refactor for, and what exactly the end result should look like. That's very important for LLMs. Also think about the scope of the changes, how many files it should ideally touch, because again, you will be reviewing all the changes. Version control systems like Git are very good instrument for actually doing the final review. So using it is a great idea. And ideally, you should use that for some menial jobs like terminology updates or naming updates or some kind of replacing one tool with another without changing logic. Even some syntax updates in your documentation. That's great at that. The guardrails here is, again, you should review everything, obviously. There are sometimes some unexpected changes that you should definitely look for. And don't treat the changes as just some kind of a regex results. It's not as reliable as that, although agentic AI use regex quite often to find specifically the scope of changes. It's still, you should watch out for some unusual places it also change. It sometimes happens. The validation use case actually really good because again, you can't expect 100% accuracy, but it can sometimes surprise you with what kind of a point of view it decided to pursue and find some internal contradiction or some external contradiction of your content. It's really, really great for this ideation, let's put it like that, what you should fix in your documentation. So it's more exploratory search for insights, and it's much better for some fuzzy search if you're not specifically know what you're looking for, because again, if you know exactly what symbols you're looking for, what you can just use regex. It's so much more reliable. AI is much better when it's not as clear. The guardrails, again, reviewing everything, the usual, and do not treat the results as a regex because it's not. Even if agentic AI uses regex tools, it doesn't mean that all the changes are localized as a regex results. No, it's not. So you should verify especially which files got changed and what exactly got changed. The automation is very interesting, especially for documentation specialists, because again, we're not professional at automation. Software engineers are more inclined to do that. But for us, it's super, super important because again, we can build so much more than we could without it. The whole documentation pipelines and all that. The guardrails here are very important, as in reviewing all the code, testing it thoroughly, and basically this automation with AI, it should be ideally deterministic as a Python script. Involving AI in your pipelines leads to sometimes unpredictable results because of the non-deterministic nature. This is an example of just what AI can do, very simple, just for itself, to automate its own work. Agentic AI is really good at using Python for some manual jobs real quick. The next use case is exploration, basically exploring the vast amount of information on the internet about some topic. Providing access to some external resources is a very powerful tool for agentic AI to actually obtain more context, which actually improves the results very significantly, especially if you're trying to put something interesting in, to engineer something in your documentation even. So don't be shy to ask about something, provide explanation if it found some facts. You should not trust everything AI says, obviously, for obvious reasons. And try to avoid seeking validation, as in providing AI with some kind of clue what you expect from it, because it can play the game basically. Finally, agentic mode is very useful for that, especially if you provide it with additional context, as in the source code repository, especially if it's public or you have permission to do such. The guardrails, again, do not trust it 100%. Always verify, test, and correlate. That's super important for this kind of exploration. And aim for understanding and practical applications. If you understand it, that it's probably true, because again, your internal model is coherent, right? So finally, we have the final use cases in troubleshooting. It's actually real good because, again, lots of qualities of AI works here very reliably. You can send lots of context in there, and it will real quick analyze like full logs, error messages, what kind of information, what kind of environment you have, real quickly, and provide you with some advice. Agentic mode actually can be very powerful for such investigations too, because it can require additional information about your system and your environment. And the best interesting case that I've seen is also step-by-step instructions for additional bugs fixing, if you don't trust agentic mode to do it for you, of course. And the guardrails, again, do not trust the results 100%. You should verify what it did to your system if you let it do anything for your system. Verify, test, and correlate not only through logs, if you can, through version control systems too, or just through the commands that has been run. Aim for understanding what it did. That's always a good advice, especially here when troubleshooting some kind of a problem. You should understand the reason better than AI did, ideally. And some common guidelines, regardless of the use cases. Basically, we have some tips, as in human being will always be responsible. We cannot yet, at least, make responsible AI because it's not a living being. So keep that in mind. Keep being very responsible. Sorry for tautology here, but still assume full responsibility for the end result and treat it as such, as in verify and validate as if you are responsible, because you are. Keep exploring, don't settle for too long, because again, this field moves so fast. Pay attention to what usually goes wrong, because these patterns keep repeating themselves, especially with the same models. Context engineering is a great thing, but it's a little bit out of date now. Now they have so much more than just context engineering. They have full-blown wikis for this agentic AI. Assuming ownership of the result, it's great, because you will be not just responsible, but you will be driving the initiative here. That's very, very important. And use all types of memory, including your own memory, not just your project's context or some short-term memory of the AI. Some overall guardrails. Well, reviewing is a common topic among most of these use cases. You always should review and validate and verify the end result. Again, just feel the responsibility for it. Okay, that will help you guide you. Also build processes for AI-assisted workflows, but it's a great idea to make this automation deterministic, as in build some scripts ideally with the help of AI, but do not, if you can, do not put AI or LLMs inside these workflows, because it will create non-deterministic results. It's a little bit unpredictable, can lead to some weird results. Using version control systems is a very powerful tool to track changes in your documentation, actually. Use it a lot. And asking AI for explanations of any particular actions it's doing, or any particular changes, or even any particular piece of code or documentation is a great tool for actually learn more about it. Again, cannot trust it 100%, but still, it is. Limiting bots access, basically you let LLM run in some sandbox environment. It's a very good idea. And basically, your content should serve your own content should be read very reliably by AI LLMs, ideally locally, for it to provide maximum flexibility and maximum access to it, not through internet. That's so much better. And generating content for the very first time can be rather tricky, because it doesn't have a lot of context. So you should provide this context for it. Finally, one of my favorite tools to do right now, well, paraphrasing and rewriting. I find that ChatGPT is quite good at it, especially if you provide it with specific instructions, what exactly tone of voice and specific constraints to use. Searching and researching topic, I use mostly Gemini. Code development, well, Claude Opus and some other code models, of course, but I've been experimenting a lot with open weight models, and GLM 5.2 is surprisingly well at that too. So I totally recommend exploring this territory to avoid vendor lock. As for software scaffolding, I mean, everyone has its own tools and toys, right? I expect you know about it more than me, but myself, I use VS Code Copilot plugin with some my own keys from OpenRouter. It works well for me. It's very reliable and can switch between models rather quickly. Also, the use cases I've been using so far are quite varied, from developing some front-end stuff, researching some topics, creating some quick refactoring in my documentation using regex or directly agentic mode, analyzing logs for troubleshooting, you name it, like lots of interesting use cases for LLMs you can find in documentation. Especially, again, the agentic AI can build so much more for documentation specialists and for yourself. Lots of automation tests for your documentation, for example, some Veil tools for style checks and all that. And checking for consistency terminology. Again, AI can be quite interesting for insights. Some real life examples here, like the front-end development I did using AI assisted development is rather great. I didn't touch any JavaScript and I'm quite happy about it. Some major documentation refactorings again, and documentation testing. Yes, actually was able to accomplish a few tutorials of my own and provide some significant and interesting insights about it. And lastly, we need to talk about optimizing your documentation for AI consumption, as in really, you're not just producing documentation nowadays with the help of AI. Other people also use AI to actually read it, which actually provides significant challenges because you need to help them. You need to help LLMs to consume your documentation in a very reliable way to provide proper answers to these users. And it's really, really hard to guarantee. You can maybe help them a little bit by creating custom LLM navigation with LLMs.txt, creating meaningful metadata to navigate through the documentation, and very structured content, of course. That all helps LLMs to navigate your content, but also establishing the authority over the topic of your own products through the usual search engine optimization. Basically, the higher your results in the search engine about your product, the better, the easier it is to find your documentation. And also providing a lot of examples is very helpful for this AI LLMs to actually provide some meaningful answers to your users, especially when they ask for something specific. Well, that is all for today. Thank you very much for listening. Feel free to contact me for any questions. Thank you.